Hello, friends. I know it might be hard to believe this, but one of my favorite topics to talk about, aside from mold and blue light, is having a baby. And I've been doing a lot of work with women over 40, and I feel like I've been having this conversation over and over. And you start to get itchy for a megaphone, and you're like, I just wish everyone knew this. And
that's why we have a podcast.
That's why we have a podcast. This
really
is my
convenient.
megaphone. Yeah. Lucky for me. And look, this information is relevant to everybody wanting to have a baby. So if you are under 40 or under 35, you're not in perimenopause, please listen anyway, because this is really helpful to set yourself up for an optimal experience. But because I'm primarily supporting women over 40, the runway's a lot shorter. And the older we get, the more oxidative stress we've accumulated, the more probably ensconced in our bad habits we are. There's a lot of things going on. And I really sincerely wish women knew these things before they either fell pregnant or before they started trying, because some of the things we're going to cover today can be fundamentally getting in the way of getting pregnant or can affect egg quality and, conception environment and things like that. So the first thing I want to say, and I think this is for every woman, even if you're never going to have a baby, from the minute you get your period, I think every woman should be taught how to track their basal body temperature. It is like having a secret window into your biological workings, and you can see month after month literally what you're doing as far as your hormonal fluctuations go. And you can identify A, if you're ovulating, B, are you ovulating in the ideal window? Because if you're ovulating too early or too late, your risk of birth defects and miscarriage go through the roof. Once you have ovulated, like if you know how to confirm ovulation, how long is your luteal phase? Because we're really aiming for at least 12 elevated temperatures. Anything less than 10, you're probably not going to be able to hold a pregnancy. So basal body temperature for me, yes, you can do blood tests, but A, you need to know how to time those blood tests. Basal temperature gets the mid-luteal timing right. But second of all, bloods or salivary hormone testing is very expensive. It changes every month. You want to be going to get bloods twice a month every month, whereas the temperature chart will tell you almost everything you need to know. And if you do need to run a test, like when and where to do it. So for me, I'm struggling to think of a female client I've not said we need to do this. I think perhaps one or two I can think of it just wasn't so relevant. But the second part is, of course, timing mid-luteal progesterone testing. I know we've talked about this on the podcast many times before. The word on the street is day 21, but that only works if you have a 28 to 29 day cycle and you're ovulating on day 14 or very, very close. And it's also assuming a mid-luteal peak there, which is not necessarily the case either. Whereas when you're tracking basal temperature, you can actually see when the thermal shift occurs, and you can time your blood test for 5 to 7 days post-thermal shift, assuming you've got a decent luteal phase. But if you don't, which you'll see from the prior month, you can actually pick what mid-luteal is for you to actually see what peak progesterone level you're actually getting. Now, the reason why that's important, there's a lot of reasons that we want to make sure your hormones are optimized. However, if you are producing less than 40 nanomoles per liter of progesterone, you are at risk of being unable to hold on to that pregnancy. And in perimenopause, our progesterone production is starting to fade a little bit, and our nervous system is so much more sensitive, which means our ability to kind of manage that plus make enough cortisol and survive our stressful lives is really tricky. And so it allows us to identify where the gaps are as far as progesterone production goes. One option is looking at bioidentical progesterone as well, depending on the runway that you've got and how appropriate that is. But it just allows women to see exactly what's going on. The other cool thing is you don't get surprised by your period because you see the temperature drop if you are not pregnant. And also you'll know almost straight away if you are pregnant because you'll see that temperature stay up. So I just think it's such a gift and such a great tool for every woman to be using. Now, what I will also say about that though, in closing, is traditional basal temperature tracking was done with oral thermometers. And strictly speaking, using the symptothermal method, that's the thermometers you're meant to use. However, they do require that you wake at 6 a.m. every morning and not have had a disturbed sleep the night before in order to have an accurate temperature. So I know, Nat, you're a big fan of Temp Drop too, and we'll put a link in the show notes, but there's a wearable thermometer that you pop on your arm and it just measures your temperature overnight, does not emit any EMF while you're wearing it, but it allows you to get the most accurate temperature. And the reason why I think for perimenopause it's particularly important is often sleep is starting to get a bit wobbly. And if you already have one child, maybe more, you're probably not getting uninterrupted sleep anymore. It's probably been a long time. So it just allows us to get that most accurate information. So that would be the first thing that I would just wish every woman knew, but especially if you're trying to conceive over 40.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really helpful tool to use for all of those reasons. And I think the only time I ever see any resistance to it is if it's creating more anxiety in someone.
Sure.
Even if that's the case, if you're able to at least just get a little bit of an idea for a few months of what your general trends are, that can sometimes just be really helpful as context and information for the practitioner to see, okay, shorter luteal phase, let's look at, boosting progesterone with some Vitex as an example. Don't go and do that without some testing because there are exceptions to that, but that is an example of how, you could use it clinically. And then after that, once you've kind of got a little bit more of an idea, if it's still creating a lot of anxiety, you can park it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes what I've done, if we've really felt like, the client and I, that it's a really helpful tool, but it is creating anxiety in them, is they will just sync it, like sync the Temp Drop temperatures to the app and have their partner export the charts to me directly, like because you can share those charts and then I'll still get the data, but they're not analysing it themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people have that level of self-control. I personally wouldn't, but I have had some clients do that when they've felt like they really want me to have that data, but they didn't want to overanalyze it themselves.
Fair enough. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. So, I think that's a great place to start. The other thing that I would be absolutely straight on to doing is doing some general bloods, and in particular looking at your thyroid function, including your TSH, your free T4, your free T3, and your thyroid antibodies. Yes, I do have a particular bias towards thyroid health and thyroid testing, but it's because times of hormonal change, including puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, are times when the thyroid can wobble a little bit or be challenged. And because thyroid health is so important to pregnancy, both having it occur in the first place and holding that pregnancy, it's just information you don't want to miss and you don't want to delay. You want to see, is my TSH 2.5 or below? If it's not, you want to do something about that before you actually start trying, because a TSH of above 2.5 in early pregnancy increases the risk of miscarriage by quite a lot, and it's a mitigatable factor. So if that happens, there are herbs and there's also bioidentical thyroid hormone that you can take to bring that quickly down. And I say quickly because if you are in a situation where you are in your 40s and you're feeling time is of the essence, and to a degree that is true, then you want to try and shift things as quickly as possible. And the same with knowing about whether or not there's thyroid antibodies, because again, the presence of those are going to increase the risk of miscarriage, and you can do something about that to mitigate them, to try and reduce them as best as possible. And so it's really about testing the things that you can influence in a positive way. It's also just a really good idea to have a look at where some of those key basic nutrients are at. Like, am I iron deficient? Do I have enough zinc? Am I vitamin D deficient? Because those things will also come into play, both in terms of actually falling pregnant, but also the health of that pregnancy and the health of you through the pregnancy, and of course, by default, the health of the baby. And they're not super expensive or difficult things to test. I actually have a free hormone testing guide that includes some of those basic tests in them as well. I think the link in my Instagram bio would probably take you there.
We'll put it in the show notes,
with some optimal reference ranges and also some links to some direct-to-consumer testing that you can use if you try to advocate for yourself through the doctor and that doesn't work. Obviously, if you work with a naturopath one-to-one, they can help advocate for you and do some of that heavy lifting. But if you're not, or you're not in a position to, you can still access that. And I think it's just a really important step to take.
Such an important step. And these, as you said, time is of the essence. And what I have seen with some clients is they've been trying. And then when these things have been looked at, it's like, oh, that's why. And however many months or, sometimes years has been lost because this wasn't addressed. So, yeah, really important. Another thing that I also feel really strongly about, and this is actually a mistake I made, which I'm so pissed off with myself about, is always checking the male partner. Now, this is something that I am pretty insistent on with clients. There are some partners that just don't want to be examined, and I really question why you would procreate with someone who's already being a dropkick deadbeat dad at that point.
Yeah, I understand what you mean because in like a very Lou Till me, I'm like, grow up, like you're 50% of this equation. And I understand though, like the compassionate part of me understands that sometimes the story I think male partners tell themselves is that, sometimes I think it's a genuine lack of knowledge.
Yes,
sometimes I think that they see their general health or their perception of their general health of like, well, I feel pretty fine. Like I don't have any big health issues. So of course my sperm are going to be fine. I think there's an assumption that you always are going to feel something in particular when your semen has some issues. Whereas it's just not the case. And there's so much environmentally even that's going to impact that. So
big time.
I think starting with education can be helpful. So there's some context to that because in my experience, many males like to know why, and if you give them a solid reason why, and then also bring them into the conversation of like, this is a team effort, that can be helpful. But I feel like, I agree. If you've tried that and they're still not agreeing to something that is, sure, it's probably not that pleasant to have to wank off in an office and provide a sample, but, we grow humans, birth humans, have periods every month. We can do hard things.
We can do hard things. And there's
pun intended.
It's likely you've been doing that your whole life. I'm pretty sure you can just do this one more time for the team. It's a good point. I think we forget that what we know isn't what everybody else knows. But what I think is really interesting is, number one, we've known for a very long time that sperm are very sensitive to oxidative stress. In fact, it's my opinion that in the next probably 10, 15 years, we're going to start using semen samples to gauge men's health in general. There's so much you can tell from it, and it's such an easy thing to get, generally speaking. Unlike looking at an egg that comes out once a month at, some mysterious moment, and then you've got to try and catch it. But also there's more recent evidence suggesting eggs don't age out like we've been led to believe as well. So most women, there's so much nonsense in #science. There are just theories that have become fact, but they actually aren't. So number one, the concept of never making new eggs has been debunked in other animals. And also now that they show that eggs aren't aging the way that we've been told that they do at all. In fact, they're highly protected. Now, of course, all of our cells are aging from the moment we're born. So there is no way you can get around time and also the accumulated oxidative stress, life stuff that happens with time also. But the leading cause of miscarriage is DNA fragmentation in sperm. And there are men doing semen analyses, but all they're looking at is sperm count, morphology, motility, and it's not enough because you could pass that test but have really high DNA fragmentation.
I've seen that. a fair bit.
Yeah. It's really devastating. And I just think, yes, it's an extra cost. So I do appreciate that it's not something that's covered like standard semen analysis. So if it's out of the budget, I would almost treat a male partner like they have DNA fragmentation because there's no harm in doing that.
That's my strategy too.
Is it? Yeah. I think, and especially if it's, say a FIFO worker or someone who's a bit, I don't want you too up in my junk.
Why a FIFO worker?
Well, no, so
how do you know that those specific people
There was
don't
a
want...
reason I said that. Oh, no, so people that you would expect have got high DNA fragmentation.
Yes,
poor
I'm
circadian
following.
rhythm, like heavy metal exposure, like, tradies who work with chemicals. Like there's a lot of things that you're like, on paper, you're probably higher at risk for this and we could do something about that. And so if you feel uncomfortable about testing, we can assume you have a problem and we will treat it. If you're happy to take the things and do the things, we'll let you get away with not wanking in a commercial space. But
make sure you deliver it just like that.
Yes, I will. Well, look, I went through this with my ex-husband. So I had 3 miscarriages and I'm so angry at myself that I assumed, because we had a very healthy lifestyle, he didn't have anything really evidently that I would go, oh, that's a red flag. Like there's definitely going to be a problem. So, and because I'd been through really significant mold illness, I just kind of assumed it was me. I was like, oh, that's got to be me. But then I was like, I went through an absolute palaver with trying to get it tested. It's probably another story for a different podcast, but I flew what I passed home from Tasmania to Queensland and had it in my fridge. And like it was
I got photos, yeah.
Yeah, that was number
was that
3.
That one? Oh, okay.
No.
I only have photos
we
of one of them.
weren't close friends with the first one.
So it wasn't on photo level yet.
No, we weren't there. I couldn't send you photos of things like that at that point in time.
Yeah.
But no, you saw number 3. But I'm so angry we didn't think to look at him first. And then I went, right, you know what? This isn't adding up. This really isn't adding up. Like I'm doing everything here. And what we found was he had more than 55% DNA fragmentation. So like just really like the worst grade you can get. And I was shocked and surprised knowing our lifestyle, but on a deeper level, I sort of uncovered there was a bit of a thyroid issue. His white cell distribution was suggesting of a parasite. He'd done a number of overseas surf trips. So we treated all of that. And 4 months, I think the test he did was 5 months later, and he had less than 11% DNA fragmentation. It's like the healthiest you can get, like liquid gold. We were having a good laugh about it. Like, and even the GP, he was a good guy actually, because normally you have to get this through a fertility specialist because GPs don't really know what to do with the information, but they can order it. And he went back to the GP to get the results, and they were like, the GP said, oh, well, the proof's in the pudding. And my ex-husband was like, literally. Anyway, so I guess to kind of close out that story, I got rid of the husband. So we didn't end up having a baby. But my whole point in that is you just can't overlook it. You can't make assumptions based on someone's lifestyle, habits and things. And I just think it's not a good idea to omit looking at that, or at least attempting to preemptively address problems. But once you're over 40 and the runway's getting shorter, this is something I would really push for, either to assess or to just proactively address.
And we have done a podcast on, like a few podcasts on male fertility.
I think we've got 3.
Yeah,
we'll
there
link
is
them.
3, R3, and one of them, I believe, we go through the semen analysis stuff. And I think it's really important to listen to that episode because there are some things about looking for a lab to do it at and a few other nuances that are super important. So please make sure before you go and have your partner, or if you are a male listening, before you go and first of all, amazing that you're listening to a over 40
cheering you on. Yeah.
Welcome. Make sure you go and listen to that episode so you don't waste the sample or the money that you spend on the sample.
Yes, good point.
So moving on then, some other things that I would really make sure are addressed is any gut issues, because for a number of reasons. One, anything that is going on in the gut from an inflammation or dysbiosis perspective is going to be having an effect on other microbiomes. So the vaginal microbiome, the uterine microbiome, like the endometrial microbiome, like all of it is connected. And I think it's really important to address that, because if there is a lot of dysbiosis, if there are parasites, if there's SIBO or SIFO, like bacterial or fungal overgrowths, depending on the significance of it, it's going to be contributing to some form of inflammation in the body, and also directly into some of the tissues that are going to be super important for implantation, for placentation, for all of those things that help you create a really healthy baby. Of course, it's also going to be important for knowing that your gut microbiome is very much going to influence that child's gut microbiome and therefore their health for the rest of their life. But even before that, because what we're trying to do here is just get pregnant, there is a lot that is important to consider there. The other thing that I would say, just on a very pragmatic and practical note, is it's quite challenging to fix SIBO or SIFO or a parasite or a significant bacterial imbalance once you are pregnant. It's not that there's nothing that you can do naturopathically, but you're more limited because we can't use the same breadth of the toolkit when we're talking about various herbal medicines that we would usually use. And so I really think that, sometimes I have clients in a situation where they are over 40 or time is really of the essence, and we know if they've got clear gut issues, or we find that there are gut issues, and they're really naturally and understandably worried about, but I don't want to lose time. And what I often say to them, person dependent, is if we treat this well, or at least do the best we can for even a couple of months, just like 2 cycles, that I understand that feels like you're losing time in terms of that's 2 ovulations or 2 attempts that you feel like have just lost. The way that I see it is that it's improving the quality of the egg, the quality of the environment that egg's going to implant into, and the quality of your system as a whole. And that is going to be a net benefit, because you're then increasing your chances theoretically of actually having a successful pregnancy and being able to hold that pregnancy, and then, therefore not losing time in if you were to miscarry. And nothing's a guarantee. So unfortunately, we can't sit here and say, guarantee if you do all of your gut work prior, you're definitely not going to miscarry, you're definitely going to fall pregnant. No one can sit there and say that. And if they do, I think that you should find someone else, because I think it's really important to be very hopeful, proactive, but not overpromise things that are outside of your control. There's so much that we know, but there's also so much we don't know, and that is out of our hands. Yeah. So I think it is important to address, if you can, and I would reframe it in your mind, if you're feeling that anxiety come up of an investment in the outcome being one that you want and having a positive effect on the chances, rather than just seeing it as I'm either missing a chance or I'm gaining a chance just based on, am I trying this month? Yeah. You are doing something even when you're not doing something.
I love that sentiment so much. And it is a real balancing act, but and I know you'll have seen this too, is women understandably feel a lot of pressure and feel like they're in a rush and they can't afford to waste every ovulatory opportunity, but then they might fall pregnant and then be pregnant for a couple of months and then miscarry and then have to start again. And it's it's my preference to take everything off the table that could have a negative impact where that's practical. Sometimes you do have to just make the best decision you can in the moment with what you have. But yeah, as you say, there isn't any guarantee, but for me, it's like you're stacking the deck in your favor if you can take care of those things. And just a little bit, an extension of that too is the microbiome is also programming your child's immune system across the placenta. It's also feeding the microflora in your breast milk. it's the main reason why women get mastitis. It's literally dysbiosis of the breast from the bacteria that's being pulled through from the gut. So again, there's so many knock-on effects. If even like you said, you can just spend 1 to 2 cycles doing a bit of a tidy up, maybe not just fixing everything to a ground zero, as perfect as you can, but just lowering the inflammatory load, improving the natural ecosystem, you're just going to be so much better off. So if you can allow that wiggle room, I'd recommend it. And of course, that has a flow-on effect to the vaginal microbiome too and the ecosystem there. And I find, that's a really common problem affecting women's ability to conceive or to hold a pregnancy as well. So a little bit like your gut microbiome, you can have not enough good bugs in there, and you can also have some sneaky bad bugs. Some people are aware of, the basics like thrush or, Gardnerella is like the number one sort of bacterium that's associated with bacterial vaginosis. But there are a lot of other microbes like Atopobium and ureaplasma that if they're present, they negatively affect your ability to actually have implantation occur or hold a pregnancy. And also if you're low on the good bacteria, then your pH shifts, which then allows the bad bacteria. And then of course that even in the absence of bad bacteria, if your pH is too alkaline or not acidic enough, you can end up with a low-grade inflammation vaginally and endometrially, which is also going to influence things as well. So to me, I cannot think of one client where we've done a vaginal microbiome test and it was perfect. And that's not surprising, really. Like that's not like a shock, oh my God, what's wrong with this world? But by the time, especially when you get to 40, you've probably had antibiotics for many different things. You might have picked things up from, dodgy boyfriends back in the day, because some of these things are asymptomatic, right? So you think, oh, I don't have any problems down there, but actually there's some little things in there. So again, I don't love when someone's been trying for a while or they're like, oh no, I feel fine. And then a few months later, like, oh, maybe we'll check. And then we find there's a culprit that we could have dealt with 8 weeks ago and been in the clear. So would strongly recommend that test as well. I think we actually did a whole episode on that. So I'll make sure we put that in the show notes too.
Great. Love that for us and for everyone listening. Well, I think the other final thing to kind of mention is just addressing your nervous system and addressing any sleep issues, mostly because, I might not go down too much of a rabbit hole in the interest of time and the fact that we've talked your ears off about this many times, but your nervous system directly impacts your hormones, including progesterone. And as you were saying a little bit earlier, when you're moving through perimenopause or you're in your 40s, like you've just got a little bit less wiggle room. And that's normal, by the way. This is not a disease. Perimenopause is not a disease. It is a stage of life. And it's, again, not to say that you can't fall pregnant. It just means that there might be some extra things you need to finesse as best you can. And I don't think that you have to be perfect with it. I think sometimes the pursuit of perfection itself ends up creating too much stress. But I also don't think you can bury your head in the sand. And I think it's about being resourced with, okay, if I have a certain amount of energy, money, time to put towards things that are going to support my nervous system and by default my hormones, what are they going to be? And that's, I think, where it is really helpful to have a practitioner one-to-one guide you. Otherwise, the list is endless, and that's where that paralysis by analysis just steps in versus being able to pick and choose your battles a little bit. So I really do think that's important. We have actually done a masterclass on ways to boost your progesterone, and we share a lot about the stress side of things in there and things that you can do if you aren't in a position to afford to be able to work with someone one-to-one. We packed a lot. I think it went for over 2 hours, and there's a guide attached to it as well. We've packed a lot into that. So feel free to check that out in the show notes as well. And then, the other thing actually, speaking of webinars.
Yes, speaking of webinars.
Is
so what you just said before was great. Like I think analysis, like paralysis, is really problematic, and trying to get everything perfect is so counterproductive. I'm giggling internally about how many women who I've said, okay, let's just give it a month and run some tests, and then they're pregnant that month because it's the 1 month they weren't thinking about it. Is quite funny and totally understandable too. But I have put together a really special webinar called the Baby Blueprint, and you are welcome to join even if you are under 35 or under 40. But I'm just so passionate about women, in perimenopause, being able to have the baby that they really want, whether it's their first child or they're adding to their family. And it's really covering the main fundamentals that need to be addressed, so that rather than looking at all of these things going, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed, there's so many things, how long is this going to take, what is it going to cost me? It is really a nice roadmap for here are the basics you want to get right and how to do that, so that you feel set up to move forward. And even if you think you might need IVF, or even if you're planning to do IVF doesn't overcome the influence of these missing pieces. And I can tell you, and I know you've had this experience too, Nat, when you do the groundwork, you set yourself up for a better outcome, a faster outcome with IVF too. So yes, that is coming up. If you are listening to this episode after it's gone live, there will be a replay. You can still register. But if you are listening to this before the live date, love to have you on so you can ask me questions in person.
Amazing. We'll make sure that link is in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any follow-up questions you have after this episode, feel free to DM us. And yeah, we're always happy to do a part 2 if that's necessary.
All right, friends. See you in the next episode.